It's a different puzzle. I always have a different dress on. I've never worn the same dress twice in 30 years.
For more than 4 decades, two people appeared side by side in millions of American homes. One was Pat Sajak, the quick-witted host of Wheel of Fortune. The other was Vanna White, the woman who became famous for turning letters, smiling at contestants, and becoming one of television's most recognizable faces. To viewers, they looked almost inseparable. They joked together. They traveled together. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, career milestones, and family moments together. And because television audiences had watched them together for so long, one question kept coming back. Were Vanna White and Pat Sajak ever more than friends? For years, magazines and tabloids played with that idea. Some stories suggested romance. Others suggested tension. Some even made it sound like the two secretly had a relationship behind the cameras. But the truth was much simpler, and in some ways much more meaningful. Vanna White has repeatedly described Pat Sajak as a brother and a lifelong friend. After Sajak retired from Wheel of Fortune in 2024, White made it clear that their relationship had not ended with the show. In 2025, she gave fans another update. She said she still saw Pat. They were still friends, and they even had dinner together. That one detail told fans something important. The friendship had survived the cameras. But to understand why that friendship became so powerful, you have to go back to the beginning. Vanna White did not walk onto the Wheel of Fortune stage as a television legend. She was a young woman trying to make it in entertainment. She had grown up in North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and dreamed of being on television from a young age. Before Wheel of Fortune, White worked as a model and appeared on television programs while trying to build a career. Then came the opportunity that changed everything. In 1982, Vanna White joined Wheel of Fortune. First, she was nervous, very nervous. She later remembered how difficult it was to even speak because she was so anxious about appearing on television. And then there was Pat Sajak. Sajak had already become the host of Wheel of Fortune in 1981. White was new. She had to learn how the show worked, how to handle the cameras, and how to become comfortable in front of millions of viewers. According to White, Sajak helped her through those early days. He made her feel comfortable. He helped build her confidence. And that became the foundation of their relationship. Not romance, not some secret Hollywood affair. Trust. Over the years, the two developed a rhythm that viewers could feel. Sajak handled the contestants. White handled the puzzle board. But the real magic happened in the small moments. A joke, a smile, a strange reaction from a contestant, playful argument. Sometimes they barely needed words. The audience already understood their chemistry. And that chemistry created the rumors. People began wondering whether there was something more between them. The rumors became so common that even Sajak eventually addressed them. But the people closest to the show understood something the tabloids often missed. Their chemistry was real. The romance was not. And there was a reason the friendship worked so well. They did not have to pretend to be best friends every second. They could tease each other. They could annoy each other. They could walk away after a disagreement. Then they could come back and continue working. That balance helped them survive something very few television partnerships ever survive. Time. Decade after decade, viewers watched Vanna and Pat grow older together. They watched each other get married. They watched each other become parents. They watched their careers change. They watched the world around them change. And through all of it, Wheel of Fortune remained the constant. But there was another reason their relationship became so fascinating. They were together so often that viewers almost treated them like a married couple. Yet behind the scenes, their lives were separate. Vanna had her own relationships. Pat had his own family. They had their own homes and their own lives. The friendship worked because neither person needed the other to be something they were not. That may be the biggest secret of all. And after more than 40 years, that secret became impossible to hide. Because when Pat Sajak finally walked away from the show, Vanna White's reaction revealed just how deep the bond really was. And what happened next made millions of longtime viewers emotional. For years, Wheel of Fortune was more than a television program. It was part of the daily routine for millions of families. Dinner, The television, the familiar music, Pat Sajak at the center, and Vanna White beside him. That routine became so normal that people forgot how unusual their partnership really was. Most television co-hosts eventually change. Most shows replace people. Most friendships formed at work disappear when the job ends. But Vanna White and Pat Sajak were different. They spent more than 4 decades working together. That meant thousands of episodes, thousands of rehearsals, thousands of late nights, thousands of little moments that never made headlines. And according to White, they shared far more than what viewers saw on television. They traveled around the world together. They watched their children grow up. They celebrated personal milestones. They joked around on set. Sometimes they even played practical jokes on one another. That was the real relationship. A brother and sister kind of friendship. Not perfect, not dramatic, just lasting. And that is why the old romance rumors were so strange. The audience could see the chemistry, but chemistry does not always mean romance. Sometimes 2 people simply understand each other. Sometimes 2 personalities fit together so naturally that viewers assume there must be something else happening. For Vanna and Pat, that chemistry became part of the show's identity. The producers knew it. The audience knew it. And even the people who worked behind the scenes recognized it. White later explained that creator Merv Griffin saw her and Sajak as a brother and sister team. That was exactly what made the pairing work. But there was another important detail. They did not spend every moment together when the cameras stopped. That may have helped save their friendship. In an older joint interview, Sajak and White talked about how they could get on each other's nerves after spending so much time together. Their solution was simple. They could go their separate ways. They could have their own lives. Then they would come back and work together again. It sounds ordinary, but it may have been the secret to lasting more than 40 years. There were also moments when the public tried to turn their friendship into something scandalous. At one point, an April Fool's joke about the 2 being in a relationship became another part of the mythology surrounding them. The joke worked because people already believed there might be something there. But there wasn't. The reality was much less sensational. And sometimes reality is more interesting than the rumor. Because Vanna White's life was changing in ways viewers could not always see. She experienced marriage, motherhood, divorce, and the normal struggles of getting older in the public eye. Through those years, Pat remained a familiar presence. Not as her husband, not as her boyfriend, but as someone who had known her for longer than almost anyone else in her professional life. That distinction became especially important when Sajak announced that he was leaving Wheel of Fortune. After 41 seasons as host, Sajak announced that the 2023-24 season would be his last. For viewers, the news was shocking. For White, it was deeply personal. She had spent 41 years standing beside him. She once compared the experience to reading a great book. Eventually, even the best book has to end. But the ending did not mean the friendship was ending. Before Sajak's final episode in June 2024, White delivered an emotional farewell. She became visibly emotional while talking about what their years together had meant. She thanked him for making her feel comfortable when she was new. She thanked him for helping her become confident. And she made one thing very clear. Their relationship would continue. Sajak also spoke about White during his final farewell. He described her as his professional other half and reflected on how much of life they had witnessed together. They had seen each other's lives change. And they had always been there for each other. That is the part the old romance rumors never explained. If they had been secretly involved, the story would have ended years ago. But their friendship kept going, even after the cameras stopped rolling together every night. And that was about to become the biggest test of their relationship. Because when the person you have worked beside for more than 40 years leaves, you suddenly discover whether the connection was really about the job, or whether it was about the people. Vanna White's answer was clear. It was about the people. But what happened next changed everything. When Pat Sajak hosted his final episode of Wheel of Fortune in June 2024, the end of an era became official. Sajak had been the face of the show for more than 4 decades. Vanna White had been beside him since 1982. And suddenly, the familiar partnership was gone. But Vanna stayed. Ryan Seacrest eventually stepped into the host's position, beginning a new chapter for the show. For White, the transition was not easy. How could it be? Imagine working with the same person for more than 40 years. Then imagine walking onto the same stage with someone else. The set looks familiar. The lights are familiar. The puzzle board is familiar. But one person is missing. White admitted that when she heard Sajak was retiring, she even wondered whether she should retire too. She was not ready to leave. She still loved the job. But she had to face the reality that the partnership that had defined so much of her life was changing. And this is where the real story of Vanna and Pat becomes more interesting. Because the audience finally got to see what happened when the cameras were no longer holding them together. Would they drift apart? Would they stop seeing each other? Would the friendship become one of those Hollywood relationships that disappears once the work ends? Apparently not. In 2025, White gave fans a simple answer. She still saw Pat. They were still friends. They had dinner together. She said he was still in her life. That may sound like a small statement, but after 40 years it means everything. Their relationship had survived the show, and that destroyed one of the biggest assumptions people had made about them. Their closeness was not simply television chemistry. It was real friendship. White even described Sajak as someone she loved like a brother. That language matters, because for decades, fans had tried to place the pair into a romantic story, but White consistently placed them somewhere else. Family, friendship, trust, that was their story. Of course, that does not mean their relationship was completely boring. They had disagreements. They teased each other. They sometimes annoyed each other. White once joked about one disagreement involving something as simple as ketchup on a hot dog. That little story actually says more about them than a dramatic Hollywood rumor ever could. Real friendships are not always perfect.